This week on Two Legs.
8 arms to hold you.
And I happen to be one of the co-authors, Mark Easter.
And I'm Chip Madinger, the other half. And we're going to be here this program to tell you about how we put that together way back when, in the pre-internet days.
Stay tuned. Hi, McCartney fans, and welcome to another edition of Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. We are a Paul McCartney talk show mainly dealing with Paul's solo career. I'm one of your two co-hosts, Tom Hunyadi, and as always, I'm joined by my partner in crime and my backwards traveler, the one and only Andy Nichols. Andy, what's going on, my friend?
Evening, Tom. How you doing? Good to see you again, and ready to dive into some 8 arms.
Yes, very good, very good. Yes, very excited about this episode. As you just saw, Andy, and you can see with the two other images here, we have a couple guests with us today. Very excited to have them here. They are the authors of the very popular book, 8 Arms to Hold You. It is pretty much considered the Bible in the solo careers, or I should say the first 30 plus years or so of the solo careers of the Beatles, and they are the one and only Mark Easter and Chip Madinger. Hello, guys, and how you doing?
Hello,
Hey, Tom.
Hello, Tom and Andrew.
So it's good to see you guys. Thanks for making the time. We really appreciate you guys being here. Before we get started with the book, we'll talk about a couple things. As we all know, this past Saturday, Paul McCartney performed on the One World Together at Home special on Saturday nights. He performed a version of Lady Madonna that he, kind of done before on the Chaos and Creation at Abbey Road. Just wondering to get your thoughts on this this performance. Andy, what was your take on the performance?
Like I said, we had heard it already in 2005, so I wasn't really, I wasn't shocked that he had gone to it for this rendition, given the content, the circumstances, obviously. So, voice is going, but I had no problem with the arrangement.
Yeah, I thought the arrangement was all right. They used a different, was it more like an electric piano than the regular, grand ballroom piano for this arrangement. I thought it sounded okay. Vocals, yeah, it is what it is. His vocals are not the same as even when he did it in 2005. A lot of changes in his vocals, and maybe they're not for the better, but it's like I said, it is what it is. He's going to continue to be stubborn probably for the rest of his singing career and do these vocally challenging songs, whatever. Mark, what were your thoughts on the track?
Well, I mean, I've wondered why Paul hasn't gone to Roger Daltrey's throat doctor for the last 10 plus years, because if you've gotten to hear Daltrey like how he was in maybe 06 on that last Who record before the newest Who record, he definitely has had improvement.
Gotcha.
And so I don't understand why he insists on continuing to have these, as you said, vocally challenging moments. It doesn't do him any good, but the arrangement was fine. I could have done without the Fender Rhodes, sort of cheesy 1975 kind of thing. But beyond that, he's Paul.
He's Paul. Chip, your thoughts?
I wagered with the wife that he was going to do Let It Be again.
Right.
So it was a nice surprise to see him do something else.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, once he started talking about his mother, it's just like in the back of my mind, it's like, okay, it's going to be Let It Be. I mean, there's how could it be anything else?
Yeah.
You know, in a way. So, but it seemed like it was obviously it was a shorter version. You know, the whole verse with baby at your breast. You know, I think was cut out.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't live, was it? It wasn't live, right? It was all
well, the thing is I think all of these clips had to have been pre-recorded because they all seem to be specifically timed just to make sure that there was room for everything in this 2-hour event.
Yeah,
so it just seemed like everything had like a certain amount of limit, and then plus he talked a lot throughout his segment. So in a way, it seemed like he talked almost as much as he performed. So I would have liked to see him do something like Stevie Wonder did, which was do kind of like a medley. He started with the Lean on Me, and then he went into Love's in Need of Love Today, which I thought was very appropriate and done very well. So
for sure.
But Stones were the Stones. I know a lot of people on social media were talking about Mick still sounds like he does in the '60s, but again his vocals were nowhere near as vocally challenging throughout his career as Paul's were. And what did you guys think? Did you guys watch the whole thing, or what did you guys think of like Elton John and the Stones? Chip?
I think the Stones took the show.
Yeah.
I think so. And Elton's vocal was equally challenged.
Right.
I don't know what was up there. Yeah.
It seemed like he was outside too. I mean, I had heard that he doesn't even have a piano anymore in his home. Yeah. So it looked like he was outside. Someone brought him a piano.
Yeah. All I can say is I was grateful for the invention of the DVR so that I could watch those three and then go back to my normal viewing.
Right. Gotcha. That's all I really watched with those three.
Yeah. Also, in a couple episodes ago, Andy, we mentioned a new Blu-ray release of The Family Way, but this is only going to be in the UK. And we had learned that Chip was going to be involved with this release. Chip, can you talk about that experience and what did you do for that Blu-ray release?
I just found out today it's got a release date of May 4th.
Okay.
And Amazon is not shipping to the U.S. I guess it's Region B encoded.
Yes. Right.
But I'm sure somebody will find a way around that and get it out there. But no, I was approached late last year by the producers who just were looking for some talking head material. Mm-hmm. And since I'd co-produced the soundtrack reissue several years before with Mark's friend Carrie Mansfield, they reached out to me to see if I'd have anything to say about it. So I had to refresh my memory, and I gave the editors going to earn his keep on that one. There were a lot of stops and starts.
Right. Was that a audio only interview, or is that like this? Is this going to be a video interview as well?
No, it was a video interview. They came in, brought the lights and the cameras in, and so I'm interested to see it. I haven't even seen any rushes from it yet. Gotcha.
Cool. Anything about the interview you can tell us about with what it contains? I mean, are you just more or less talking Paul's involvement with the soundtrack?
That's right. It was more on how he was involved with the. It was pretty much a recounting of my liner notes for the CD reissue, more so in interview form. So it was, how did he become involved? When did they do it? What was his amount of participation? How much did George Martin contribute to it?
Right.
And it's really amazing how quickly they turned things over in those days.
Right. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, Lennon was originally supposed to be a part of that as well, was he not?
There was talk of the two of them. John, when he was away in Spain, thought that when he returned that he was going to be working on the soundtrack with Paul, but once he got there, he realized that it was pretty much a Paul solo deal, but he was there. He was there in the house when Paul turned over how many notes it was, 10 notes to George Martin.
Right.
To take away. So John was glad to see that he got some royalties from that one.
Oh, he did?
I think so.
Oh, okay. And then George Martin, I mean, he pretty much, like you said, he took those 10 notes that Paul gave him and he ran with it. And he pretty much, this was, you could almost say it should have been a Paul McCartney / George Martin production, wouldn't you have?
I think it was more George Martin production, but with music by Paul. But I mean, of course, they're going to play it up to sell as many soundtrack albums as they can,
right?
As many singles.
Cool. Well, I look forward to trying to find that interview. I know there's there's region free Blu-ray players out there. So I mean, if you could find that, and then you can have regions of Blu-rays from all regions shipped to you if you live in the States, if you have a region free Blu-ray player. So it is possible to see it, but you never know, maybe somebody might put it up on YouTube or something like that. So I look forward to seeing that, because I mean it is something to discover, because it is pretty much his first solo a gig, wouldn't you say? I mean, even though he, yesterday was pretty much him in the studio, and probably even, Eleanor Rigby was just him, but this would be considered his first solo venture.
I agree. It's his solo starting point.
Yeah.
And it is coming out on DVD as well, from what I understand. So of course we'll be able to view that.
Nice. Cool. So then getting to the book, which is, just it's a mammoth thing. Whose idea was this at first, and why take on the task of doing this?
In 1995, I co-authored the 9/10's Guide to the Solo Beatle Outtakes with Doug Sulpy. And that was a small, privately pressed book. And Doug did a lot of the writing on that, and I provided a lot of the research and a lot of the material for it. And after the book came out, I was thinking, okay, we're going to update this. And then Doug had different thoughts about how he thought it should be presented than I did. So I started to run with it on my own. And when I realized that, I needed a sounding board, that's when I brought Mark in. So maybe about a year into it.
Gotcha. Oh, so you're already
Mark.
So you're already a year into the project before bringing Mark in then.
That's how I remember it. Mark?
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, it was actually 98 when I started in on it.
Okay.
I just remember that because Chip and I used to work at the same company.
Okay,
we knew each other long. So basically, right before I left that company is when we started doing that, and that was 98. So.
Gotcha.
I have to say, I'm pretty amazed. I thought something this big would have taken a lot more years worth of research and time, and the fact that you did it in just a couple of years is pretty amazing.
Well, we're talking, the research took, Chip is primarily the research person, and there was a lot more than 2 years involved in that. I mean, his research had continued. Well, I mean, been researching since what, Chip? 1973, so in one way or another. So obviously it's just been, after that, it was a matter of, in 98, if we're going to make this a book, it's got to be readable. I like to write. I've always written. I wrote lots of articles for the Gold Mine and pieces over the years on different artists, Beach Boys, the Monkees, so forth. And
gotcha.
And I've also worked as a project assistant on tons of CDs for Rhino with Andrew Sandoval.
Oh, okay.
Who's
cool.
one of my best friends. So
Nice.
I've been doing that on and off since about 96.
Okay.
So anyway, I come to, obviously the Beatles are number one with me, but I also come to it with a slightly, I don't want to say a more jaded eye, but a more critical eye at times.
Right.
And so what we decided early on, originally it was just going to be kind of going through it, each solo Beatle, take each piece of work and have a little bit of text.
Okay.
And eventually got to a point, it's like, look, if we're going to do this, let's make it as definitive as possible.
Right, because you not only do you talk about the music, you're also talking about promotional videos, you're talking about TV specials, you're talking about guest spots all over. I mean, and so obviously now, as you just said, if you're gonna do it, let's do the whole shebang.
Right.
You know?
And you don't, as Chip said early on, you don't want it to read like an auto parts manual. And that's what it kind of looked like initially. It was just, it was all this data, but nothing to sort of glue it together that would make it something that you could refer to as a, you know, as a textbook, kind of as a piece of research, but also something that you could read as you know.
So before you even get started with Chip, I mean, were you a fan of the solo careers?
Oh,
I mean, obviously you had to be a fan of the solo careers to do something like this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've you know, the Beatles, you know, I'm 54 years old, to be 55 in a couple of weeks. So, you know, the Beatles have been my DNA since before birth. I mean, you know, my parents owned, you know, Meet the Beatles and Beatles' second album. I heard all those records as I was growing up because I had young parents. So yeah, when I, you know, first album I bought as a Beatle album was Abbey Road, you know, that I bought with my own money when I would, you know, be saving up my quarters in October of '69. So I mean, I remember very clearly. So yeah, I mean, all the way through, I was buying the solo Beatles records along with, you know, the Beatles records I didn't have at the time.
Yeah, Chip, so I would take it you were a massive fan of the solo music as well?
I'm technically a second generation fan.
Okay.
Like, born in '63, and I've always been collecting data and collecting recordings and chronicling things, and you know, that's how it came about. It was just my monstrous collection in text form, and then we added the data to it, and Mark took it away and glued it together to make it something that you could pick up and turn to any page and read away. It's not something that needs to be read from start to finish. And one thing about it was it wasn't all a puff piece. It was if something wasn't up to snuff, you know, we called a spade a spade.
Right. Well, just one of the things that I appreciate about the book is you guys also add your opinions, and you know, and I think that's great. I mean, there's a lot more opinionated pieces coming out these days, and I'm fine with people adding their opinions. I mean, as long as they're not discouraging other people from actually listening to the material and forming their own opinion, which you guys didn't, which I didn't I didn't notice you guys did at all. So bravo for that. I mean, I like that. But so now you guys are working together. So as you said, Mark, Chip was more of the research guy and you were more of the writer. So, you know, when does that, I mean, does he just all of a sudden bring all of this material for you to start writing as soon as you jump on board?
It was definitely done in sections, and you know, there would be periods where we would definitely, I mean, we got together every week. And just as a side note, I mean, during this time, I was also getting my master's in counseling and driving to where I live now. I was living in St. Louis, not far from Chip at that time. So I was driving to where I am now for my job, going back and forth, getting my master's and writing this book at the same time. So I look back and I'm like, you know, boy, I wish I could be 33, 34 again and have that kind of energy, because I can't imagine doing it now. But, you know, so what we would do is in the midst of all that, we would schedule days where I would come over and we would, you know, say, okay, well, what are we going to work on tonight? And then sort of go through the material together and then say, okay, how do we want to approach this from a narrative standpoint.
Gotcha.
And then I would go away with that, and I would be, in the early days of the intranet of sending files back and forth, which it would take forever for some small file to reach Chip at that time.
I've noticed over the last couple of years as we've been interviewing authors on the show that a lot of these books are labor of loves, really, because it's
totally.
not just their own, the author's only job. I mean, a lot of you guys have other jobs, I would imagine. And we interviewed a couple of the people from the A's for Apple series, and they have other jobs, and and so on and so on. And was that a challenge in any way? I mean, did you find it difficult, or were you just so passionate about the project that you didn't feel like it was work at all?
No, it was definitely work. Throughout the midst of it, I was building a high rise in Midtown St. Louis, and like Mark said, I'd give him a chunk of data, he'd write it up, and then he'd come over and we'd wordsmith it line by line and just.
Yeah. Ooh, did we lose?
Or Chip, did you have a publisher lined up before you started this project, or was it going to be self-published? Tell us about the publishing aspect of the book.
I'd learned a lot of things from the publishing of the 910 book. And so I decided I was going to self-publish it, but I learned a lot on this book that I was able to use when I self-published Lennonology 15 years later. But no, this was all one-stop shop. I made the mistake of trying to produce it in Word, which is not a friendly document format for mass printing. But they worked with me and they made it happen. And from cover to cover, everything we did ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to say, as a young reader, when I bought this book when I was 18 at the time, it was very, to your point and to your credit, Mark, it's very easy to pick up and read. It flows well. It's not like I said, it's not like a use auto parts manual. You've got context. One of the things as a researcher myself and a writer, is I love your indexing and the matrices. I love all that. It's perfectly spelled out. It's just one of the things that I enjoy about the book myself, just to be able to refer back to it. Your indexing, the glossary, it's enough to kind of just give the bare basic knowledge to somebody who doesn't know that terminology or is not familiar with it. So it's not in depth. It's just a nice overview of all the kind of terms technically that you've used to describe the sessions and the takes and what's available. So I appreciated that too. So,
so I go back to it and look at it and thought, who did this? I don't even recognize the points. There's just so much in there that I can't imagine anybody tackling that and wrestling it into book form.
Right. So let's start with with researching then, Chip. Talk about that process. I mean, did you have obviously you must have had an agenda. It's like, okay, today I'm going to finding people to be interviewed for this project, and what was your game plan for the research?
There's a gentleman named Chris Engelhardt who wrote the 2 Undercover books about all the Beatles work on sessions for others. And we were talking, I think at a Beatle Fest or something, and he was telling me about how he'd interviewed all these people. And I thought, well, that can't be that hard. So I kind of put together a list and started cold calling people of all things, and found out that wasn't necessarily the right way to do it, but in some cases it was successful. And my first true interview was Hugh McCracken,
Oh, cool.
who
Okay.
had worked on the Ram and the Double
Right.
Fantasy and the Ringo the Fourth album.
Right.
And, he did not want to give an interview, but I guess he just took pity and he talked to me. And from then on, I just, made a list of the musicians and the producers and kind of went down who I could contact and who I couldn't. And was very fortunate in getting a lot of the early Wings members. Talked to, and this, you've got to remember, this was before the internet, when everybody could easily find and interview anybody.
Right.
Right.
Or before they all showed up at Beatlefest and you could have 10 interviews in a day. There was a lot of legwork involved in this, and Henry
and long
McCulloch,
distance charges.
Oh,
yes.
I bet.
That's the other thing people don't seem to remember, since in these days of what is long distance anymore.
Right.
But
right.
Chip's phone bills were substantial.
Was Skype even a thing back then?
No. There was $100 plus phone bill to talk to Henry McCulloch.
Wow.
And that was quite a surprise when that arrived.
Yeah.
And and calls to the UK. It wasn't as easy as it is today.
Right.
Writing a Beatles book wasn't a dirty word back then.
Gotcha. What about sessions information? How did you go about finding information about sessions and getting specific dates to those sessions?
I went to the respective musicians unions.
Oh.
And believe it or not, they still had and this was back then, they still had all of these records, and they shared them as long as they struck off the Social Security number information. Nowadays you can't get them to send you anything, but very fortunate to get a lot of information from the LA AFM and from I think the Nashville and the New Orleans were both helpful. New York was very unhelpful, but in collecting boots and unreleased recordings and all of that, there were sometimes dates that traveled along with the tapes, and would go through and we'd kind of sort those out on, can that be true or not? And I remember going through and creating the discographies from scratch.
Right.
Starting with All Together Now, but going to say, this can't be the right date. And, we just kind of drew on bits and pieces of what other people had done before us. This worked for Wally and Harry with All Together Now, and this worked for Chris with Undercover, and we made it our own. So,
right.
It was an enjoyable experience, and doing the research, putting it together, and making it ready for print, not so much.
Gotcha. Yeah, you brought up an interesting thing about whether it was something was believable or not. And did you come across that during your research? So like, oh, this can't be true, and then eventually getting the correct information?
I know we did, and I can't remember any of the specifics. Mark might. You got to remember, this was 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think
I know there was some myth busting going on.
Right. I think the biggest myth, the one that sticks in my mind, is the Wings Over America. Where the legend was that all of this post-production work had been done on the album. There were tons of overdubs, that they basically re-recorded the album in the studio. And going back to all of the audience tapes from every single show, and Chip lining out, okay, this definitely comes from, because again, the stuff wasn't out there then. Mm-hmm. Having to line up this performance comes from this show, this, so on and so forth, lining all that up, but then doing the actual listening and realizing they didn't do much. They really didn't do much overdubbing. I mean, there was, the overdubbing came in when they started doing Rock Show. And if you watch Rock Show, there's a ton of stuff done to that because it's a film. It's a different thing. But you know, they had Wings Over America out quickly.
Oh, quickly, yes.
You know, I mean, it was
I think it was December of '76, right?
Right, right, very beginning of December.
Yeah.
And you know, the tour, and remember, he was also working. You know, there were plenty of European dates after the American dates. So there's a lot of work that he was doing in between when the Wings Over America dates ended and that came out. So so that was kind of a nice myth to bust.
Did you guys see that tour?
I did not.
You want to hear my terrible story?
Please, yes, absolutely.
So yeah, 1976, I was 11 years old, and I had very liberal parents. But he played Kansas City. We live in St. Louis. There was a local radio station in St. Louis that had 100 tickets available.
Wow.
And my mother, the gem that she was and is, went to the radio station to get 2 tickets. She was there and she got the very last 1 ticket.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, so I'm like, okay, we've got 1 ticket here. And the whole thing was, it was going to be like a bus trip where you were going to leave from St. Louis. All the people would go together on this bus.
And you're 11 years old.
Temporary. But I was a very savvy 11-year-old. Okay. Different times, different days. And my mom was like, I trust you to do this. I think you can do it.
Ah.
My father was not.
Okay.
So I have a complete Wings Over America, Kansas City ticket down in my basement because I couldn't go, and I did not talk to my father for like a month. So, so anyway,
I might have had the same results.
There's my sad Wings Over America story. But he tried to make up for it. He bought me the album for Christmas that year.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Well,
that was nice. Right. I mean, that would have been would that have been your first concert?
Oh no! I've been going to concerts since I was about 3 years old. My first concert was Peter, Paul, and Mary in 1968 in Columbia, Missouri.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I said. My parents.
Rain Man, Mark.
Yeah. Well,
Peter, Paul, and Mary, 1968.
That's why you needed me. That's why you needed me, my friend.
That's another neat thing that we found were all of the musicians and the dates for the Spectre rock and roll sessions. Came from the LA Musicians Union, and they called the sessions Back to Mono, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3.
Right.
And you know, John talked that there were 27 musicians on the sessions, and on a few of them there were, and we were able to kind of sort all those out and put them in the original version of the book, and then subsequent research for the Lennonology series, I was able to actually determine what songs were done on which dates, and we worked that into the new electronic version of the book.
Gotcha. Was there any albums that you were dreading doing research on?
Not by Paul.
Okay.
There were a few that were difficult to find anything on. Yeah, Ringo.
A couple of Ringos.
Ringo was the last one we wrote. So
okay,
yes. Yeah.
So did you guys go in order? Did you guys go John, Paul, George, and Ringo?
Yeah, how'd you do it? That was gonna be my question.
Yeah.
I think there was I think it was all blocked out, but there was a lot of jumping around. I think we made everything yellow, and we highlighted everything as yellow. And when we wrote something, we'd take the highlighting off, so we knew it was done.
Okay.
And we just kind of worked backwards until there was no more yellow left.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah. So yeah, I mean, but no, as far as Paul, you know, since we're sort of Paul centric here in this one, I think Paul was probably the most fun to write, Chip.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, you didn't
in some respects.
To all the
except for
1989.
Okay. Except for that, in terms of
the volume of material, the volume of it to do.
I mean, certainly, yeah, George was probably the easiest just because there wasn't as much material.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
you
Right.
didn't, and his catalog as a result doesn't have as many potholes. You know, just didn't put out enough stuff.
Right. So, the cover of the book, you were able to get the spines, but throughout the book, was it, not able to do the album covers in the book?
I think we were kind of, I'll say, afraid of what would happen if we did use pictures or album covers.
Okay.
In the book, and plus, being my first, publishing deal, I didn't know how to do a lot of that stuff. I was working with a word processor program and not an InDesign or a page layout program that made it easy to import and work pictures and the like. But the cover was kind of always in my head of what I wanted to do. I wanted it to look like, my shelf of records.
I think it's a brilliant cover. Great.
I wish somewhere I've got a picture of us holding the covers on the scanner. I wish I tried to find it before.
Oh, is that how it was done on the scanner?
We literally, there were three of us.
Really?
There were three of us sitting there with Chip's wife taking pictures of us. But yeah, Chip and I would hold, like, I guess, what was it? You'd hold one end, I'd hold another. And Jeff, our friend, would like hit the button to get the scan right. And you just had to sit there.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And then you obviously you had it from both sides. Yeah.
It had to because we do like 7 or 8 at a time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd stitch them together, and then one of Chip's friends helped with that stitching and with doing some touch-ups on the spines, because you'll notice if you look at it that some things are moved up to the top. So you can see them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
All the catalog numbers are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So
okay. Yeah, fair enough. But then how were you able to get the record to put your names on it?
That was another piece of
just another scan.
Magic.
Just another scan?
Oh, took another it was some sort of A&M acetate, wasn't it, Chip?
It was something.
I know that we changed the A&M to we changed it to our initials.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If you look at the front there, at the very
it's my kids'
bottom,
initials.
Yeah, it's Chip's kids' initials. It's A and M.
M&A.
M&A. Yeah, we switched it, but it was an actually it came from
M&A, right? Yeah.
What
A&M
was
test person? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you what was funny, just looking at we're dating ourselves here now, right? 20 years on now. At the end, you have your introduction, you're talking about your numbering and the matrices and everything, Lost Lennon tapes, Jubu Jubu. And then you talk about the digital domain and how the MP3 is in the infancy of coming out. And you say, however, undoubtedly we've thought of the future of audio collecting, although we're aware of its existence, MP3 compilations have not been discussed in this text.
That's a book you couldn't write today because there's no baseline for released CDs or albums. Everybody's got their own homemade production that they've given it a different name,
no way to keep track,
a different label, and a different catalog number, and there's no standard to tell people to go look for. Yeah, you want to go find the Wings from the Wings album to get this show. And I have just lost all video contact.
Oh, we can see you just fine.
We got you.
And I'll just stay here and
you look beautiful,
frame.
Yeah, you look great. So would you then agree, Chip, that the Ringo section was your most difficult or most challenging section to research?
Yes, because there wasn't a lot out there on, say, where Ringo the Fourth and when Ringo Bad Boy was done, and those audience tapes were a challenge.
From the 80s and 90s.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I imagine something like Old Wave might be tough to.
Actually, Old Wave and Stop and Smell the Roses, Matt Hurwitz had done the liner notes for who was it? The Right Stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
and
EMI.
he'd done a great job on tracking people down. You know, that's another thing. Being based in LA, you can do something like that. And here we were in the middle of the U.S. trying to reach, you know, New York and LA and London, and but no, Matt made it very easy to do those two albums. But some of the other Ringos, you know, we had to piece together from the AFM records and
plus just contemporary reporting. You know.
Right. I would imagine that the CDs that were getting released in the 90s were a bit of a big help, especially if they had some liner notes in it. I know the like the Sentimental Journey CD has some decent liner notes where, you know, you get, you know, a lot of the, you know, the people that did the arrangements, and, you know, Ringo, you know, talks a little bit more about, you know, doing the album. Was that something you guys looked at as well? You know, recent reissues of the music?
Well, that was all pulled out of Lewison's Chronicle, all of the Sentimental Journey dates, and we were able to fill in a couple of the ones that took place in LA from the contracts that we found.
Right.
And plus,
and Bocusa Blues, the Nashville AFM gave me all the contracts for the Bocusa Blues albums, and it's really cool. There's a time card in there that all of the musicians had signed. And it gave the time of the day that they were recorded and the order that they were recorded in. And so some pieces fell together very easily. Some things, like a lot of the George, the Friar Park years were
that was
impossible to.
Also, I have to think a challenge too is just kind of going through hundreds and hundreds of concert tapes of the
bootlegs,
and listening to the source material to figure out what was the best source for this. Well, I mean, that is some tedious work, man. Going through tape after tape after tape after tape.
And it was on tape. It was not on CD.
Well, that was going to be my next
computer.
question.
You had to cue every one of those tapes manually.
Right, that was going to be my next question. What was actually were you listening to on CD, but obviously cassette, right? Was how you guys listened.
Yeah, it was all cassette. I mean, CDRs were pretty much in their infancy.
Yeah, at that
when
time
that was published.
Yeah, I got my first CDR recorder in like '98, so that would have been right at the cusp of it. So we didn't have any of that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Mark, what was any challenges for you, you know, writing the book? I mean, I would imagine you probably had the easier job of the two, probably.
Oh yeah, I mean, compared to having to listen to Ringo audience tapes from 1992.
What's my name?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, I had the fun part because I got to, you know, make my wise ass comments about, you know, I think one of my favorites is, I think they were playing a Rib Fest in '95, maybe. It was Ringo and a Rib
Ringo
Fest.
and the All-Stars.
And we said that the audience tapes of this are all challenged because people are licking their fingers, and, you know, it's that kind of thing. So it's like, you know, you had to do some things to amuse yourself once you're trudging through, you know, this kind of stuff.
Right.
But no, I had the more pleasurable job of the two, you know, in terms of doing the writing part. And but it presented challenges, because when you were talking about, okay, how do we present, you know, something like Ringo the Fourth, or how do we present something like even something like, you know, getting to Paul, like Wildlife or Pipes of Peace, or, you know, albums that are not in the upper echelon of his, you know, released catalog up to that point.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to sit there and just rag on the stuff.
Of course.
That wasn't the point, but it is to say, look, you know, there's a point where this is not equal what has come before, and it's not equaling what's going to go, you know, what's to come. What are the reasons behind that? What are some of the things that may have been happening in the background that would inform that?
Was it always going to go year by year. I really think it's cool how you guys start with the session for that year, and, you know, and you just don't say Band on the Run. You say, you know, Band on the Run. You start it with the sessions, which obviously took place before the finished product. Was that something that was always planned to do that way, or did you guys decide that, you know, throughout the project?
I think that was part of my initial design for the book, was to put to break it up by the 4 individuals, and then to take it in chronological order with the available material from TV or radio or studio, or and then to drop in the commercial releases on top of it. Okay. So you'd have all of the work that came up, and then we discussed the final sum and the commercial release.
Right.
And so that was kind of the plan, and then to go through and just do them chronologically, you know.
And also, sorry, Chip. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and the other part to what you were saying about, we always made sure at the beginning of each year to have a little bit of a running commentary.
Yes.
Of,
what,
you know, like
the year, like
exactly.
Was a quiet year for Paul. Blah 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 blah.
Right.
And I liked how you did that before each chapter too. Before you got into it, you guys gave a little summary of your opinions about that each, you know, each musician. And I if you don't mind, I'd like to, you know, say this and see who wrote this. Probably end up probably you then, Mark, if this was your opinion. It starts without a doubt the most anticipated work of any of the 4 Beatles from an artistic standpoint was the solo debut of Lennon. Was that you, or did you do that, Mark?
That would be me. That sounds like my writing.
Yeah. So you know, what was it about Lennon at that point in time that this was your view?
Well, I think because of the fact that Paul had already issued McCartney.
Okay.
It had been, even though we're certainly able to look at it in retrospect, it is a great record. At that time, it was a disappointment for a lot of people, you know, because they were expecting Abbey Road Part 2.
Exactly.
And so as a result, you've got John, who up to that point had done pretty much nothing but, you know, with the exception of Cold Turkey and Karma, had album-wise just done the experimental records and Live Peace in Toronto. So as a result, that's where that mindset comes from, is, okay, here's the other writing partner. Okay, the primary writing partner. So that, you know, this album is going to, and what the fact that John had so much to say always.
Yes.
So what is he going to say in his first total, you know, solo record? So that's where that.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that you know, I mean, for me, the underlying word there is artistic, you know, because you know, he was being artistic, especially those experimental albums with Yoko. But I mean, I would imagine though that you would have wanted to see what he was going to do commercially as well, or something that was a little bit more commercial, which, you know, a Plastic Ono Band is a little bit more commercial.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's you know, it certainly was not the world beater that All Things Must Pass was, for instance. I mean, you know, it was on and off the charts relatively quickly, even though it you know, got to a high point on the charts. It was not a huge commercial success, unlike All Things Must Pass was.
Right. Another thing then I like that you wrote for Paul, you believe because he never stops working that the quality of his material wavered over the years. And that was you as well. I mean, I would agree with that too a bit, you know, maybe, you know, take a year off of recording something and then coming to something with a fresh set of ears. You know?
I think any artist who records consistently is going to who puts out an album a year or you know, whatever it is, there are going to be peaks and valleys. You look at Bob Dylan, you look at you know, Neil Young, you look at any you know, I mean, any artist that puts out a lot of material, it's not all going to be great. So yeah.
No, I thought that was well written.
I have a question, and not to put you on the spot, Mark. I think this is more for Mark, but I'm looking for it in the book. and maybe it's in here. I don't think it is. McCartney recorded a jingle for BBC Merseyside. I want to say around like Pipes of Peace era, but I don't know if it's in here. What was the context? Do you know why he did it? What was it for? Have you heard the jingle? I sent it. I think
it's in there.
Okay.
I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but it was one of those things that was floating around on a tape filled with lots of other little fragments. I mean, we put in every little fragment.
That's what I think. That's why I read it in here initially. I can't find it at the moment, but that's what was my fun. I heard it, and I'm like, I've never heard this anywhere else before.
Yeah.
It's one little thing, but it's one of those little weird Maca things that are just floating out there. You know, that he does.
Floating out there in space. Yeah.
You know.
Somebody had the tape running at the right time. And
the other thing I also thought was cool was the that even if it wasn't on let's say like Paul McCartney, even if it wasn't on a Paul McCartney record and he worked on it, you still covered it. So say like, you know, the Ballad of Skeletons, you know, New Moon over Jamaica, Wings of a Nightingale. So if that information was out there too, you guys wanted to include that. Right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, I mean, that's another cool thing about it too. I mean, if, you know, I mean, the Ballad of Skeletons, I just became aware of last year, you know? So, you know, I found it on CD and now I'm glad I got, you know, because there's really is not a lot of information about that track as well. So it's nice to have that. Let's start with, you know, another thing for Chip. You're right, there was a television special for RAM that was discussed. When was, you know, anything what that would have looked like, or how did you come to find that information out?
That was something that came out of my conversation with Hugh McCracken. And he'd mentioned that there was consideration of putting together a television special for it, but I think it was probably, you know, an early precursor of the James Paul McCartney special.
Yeah.
Where we're going to play in the studio or play out in the field or have little movies, you know, or early promotional film type things that would come together for the entire album.
Gotcha. You know, unfortunately, I haven't gotten to all the book yet because you know, I just got the PDF copy, and thank you very much for that. I mean, Andy, you've had years to play around with this book. Is any information about the Bruce McMouse show in the book?
It's mentioned, and you two actually have two very different books in hand.
Okay, right, exactly. And I was going to get to that, you know, in a little bit as well. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you guys in your PDF update, you probably did some revisions and edits to the existing work. Yeah.
Oh yes.
We were going to correct punctuation and misspellings, and we ended up putting in about 25,000 new words and taking out about 25,000 old ones.
Okay.
So we approached it if we knew then what we know now. We didn't change the range of the book. It still stopped in 2000, but in all the information that we gathered in the year since the book had been published, we brought that to the electronic version.
I see.
Okay, gotcha.
So, you know, we were able to find out what Hushabye really was. You know, it's I want to fall asleep in my mammy's arms, and you know, all sorts of information. There hundreds.
What's that from now, Chip?
Recording dates.
What's that from now, Chip? That Hushabye? Just for those who.
It's from I want to say 1920s, 78 that John had in his collection that just ended up on the turntable the night they made two versions. And I'm not going to tell everybody what it is because I haven't been able to find a copy of it yet.
Oh, no. Okay.
For my collection, but Andy could read off the name of it there. He's got it at hand.
You're right.
Where am I going? Two Virgins?
Two Virgins, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Two Virgins.
So while he's looking that up, Mark, I mean, one of the things that I found fascinating, and looking back on, I mean, or thinking about it after I read this, it does kind of make sense. And you write, you know, you thought Wildlife would have worked better as an EP. And, you know, it's like, you know, what songs you think, you know, should have been on it? What don't you like about the album? And, you know, I'm almost tend to agree with you on that. You know, maybe it would have worked better as an EP, you know, just gets like, you know, 4 or 5 songs out and, you know,
I mean,
call it a day.
Yeah, I mean, that basically comes off of me feeling like the second side of the record. If you split that up over an EP, it'd be a pretty great record. And with a little remixing of certain vocal parts that would have made it even more palatable in my view. But yeah, the first side of Wildlife, you know, that album is what it is, which is them going in, wanting
Jamming.
to do, and basically, you know, wanting to do what he had heard Dylan had done with things like National Skyline and Self-Portrait, where he'd basically gone and just recorded a bunch of stuff and let it roll. And, you know, you get what you get when you do that.
You think that was a good career move? At the time, looking back at it now?
At the time, no. At the time, it was, you know, and I think commercially it was borne out that it wasn't. You know, they certainly, they issued no singles from it. They just about did.
Right. Yeah. Love is Strange.
And there was going to be a non-LP single out as well.
What was that going to be?
Say it was Get on the Right Thing.
Get on the Right Thing, because that had already been worked on from Ram sessions.
From Ram, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
I got Hushabye. So the songs Together and Hushabye were not actually Lennonology performances, but became part of the 2-version suite, as John introduced a pair of old 78s into the mix. Together is heard just over 9 minutes into the first side, while Hushabye, composer unknown, appears at just under 4 minutes into side 2.
So then my question is, did he have to get the copyrights to that in order to have it on that record?
No, it was listed as copyright control. And when I found the record, I was considering going out and looking at buying the copyright to it to sue Yoko. And but
you're going to do it out? No, never mind.
It's old enough that it's
public domain.
Public domain. PD.
Okay. ED. Oh, okay.
And what was the full name of it, Andy?
It was called Together and Hushabye.
See, that's
what it was called, but the actual
PDF
name of the record
isn't it in the PDF, Chip? I don't think it's in the. Yeah,
okay.
It's not in the.
It's
not in the
book.
All right, so I have to go.
So that was an example of something that we.
Tom, okay.
Yeah, I'd have to go, but it's on a different screen, and I don't want a chance.
No worries, but that would be a perfect example of something that got updated from the print book to the PDF.
So naturally, you know, updating past the 2000s was never a consideration. It was always just going to update what was in the original book. Right.
I mean, the whole purpose was, you know, obviously the book had been out of print for some time. The secondhand prices on it had gone through the roof.
Right.
And, you know, we always felt like there could be a little work done to improve what we had done before. So Chip came to me, as I can remember dates from 30 years ago. I can't remember what happened 2 years ago, but at some point Chip came to me and said, you know, well, how would you feel about going through this with a fine-tooth comb again and seeing what needs to be corrected, but not changing the shape of the book, basically, that we were not going to add.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
No. Yes or no.
I said no to, and it's like this thing, as we say at the beginning of the intro to the PDF version, that, you know, this book ends, you know, the everything that, you know, George is still alive. You know, there's a lot to come that we don't know about, and that's where this book stays. But
Right. So then with the update, then if you guys learned anything new about a particular session or a particular album, that stuff would have been entered in the book in the PDF, correct?
Data would have gone into it, but say there was something new that was bootlegged or had become available, that entries for those were not included.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's so weird.
The name of the song was "I'd Love to Fall Asleep and Wake Up in My Mammy's Arms."
Wow, that's a long title.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but
It was by Fred Douglas.
Yeah.
Good old Fred.
It's just so weird to see the end of the George Harrison section and not, it's because it's like frozen in time,
Well, and at that point, we had room to think that good things were coming because of that Billboard interview he did in '99, where he was going to put out a box set of unreleased material, and he was, so we had, even though the knife attack had happened, about 10 months before we published. That's one of the last new pieces we put in the book. We still felt like, okay, there's reason to be optimistic,
Right.
Yeah.
So we didn't change any of that. We didn't, that text stayed the same.
Right.
It's frozen in time.
Frozen in time, right?
Yeah.
Which I think that's very respectful to do, to keep that
Right.
that's your original intention of what your work wanted to be, and you're not going to try to alter what you initially tried to set out to do, which was very people.
Yeah. If and when Ringo's and Paul's solo career have ended, would you welcome somebody to do a part 2? Would you encourage it? A continuation of Eight Arms to Hold You?
What we did, somebody else, go for it. We'd love to read it.
The publishing world is so different now than it was then. We don't know what's going to be. Print media is on its way out. Everything's online, everything's electronic, and a lot of people feel that they're entitled to anything that's online.
Right.
And so it would definitely be a labor of love.
Yes.
Of course, I'd kind of want to keep an eye on it if somebody was going to go with a part 2 or something like that. But if somebody wanted to pick up,
it'll be almost like George Martin producing the Sgt. Pepper's soundtrack.
Yes.
It's your baby. Obviously, you want to help oversee its completion.
Have you guys heard any? Have you guys had any praise or feedback from anybody in the official camps? From anybody, Apple related with your work?
We sent copies to all of them, and I was told that there was a copy of it kept in Harrison's recording studio. That when they were going through and cataloging his recordings, that they were using that for reference.
Oh, wow.
And I believe that was Ken Scott who told me that.
Awesome.
So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Ringo probably binned his.
What was it we heard from a source? We heard Ringo does not read books.
Oh, wow.
No, he just publishes photo books.
Exactly. But that was the that was what I think they went through. Didn't they go through line by line or beetle by beetle, Chip? Somebody, I don't remember who that was.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was. I think Paul had a copy of it just because of things that I've seen come out of MPL appear to have been informed by our work.
Sure. Oh, okay.
I don't doubt it.
Got you. For something like the Back to the Egg TV special, which were all videos for the most part, how did you tackle that situation? Because again, there's probably not much information out there about that special.
Fortunately, at that time, Club Sandwich was very much into reporting Wing's activities. So there were some, day-by-day accountings of when they filmed the various vignettes for the Back to the Egg special.
Okay.
I want to say it was Trevor Jones who might not have written them, but he might have penned them initially. And Trevor is probably no stranger to any McCartney collector nowadays because of the cache of his Wings and McCartney recordings that were auctioned off, I think, in 1999 after his passing, which has all sorts of fantastic, previously unreleased material that we didn't know about at the time. We just had the listing from the Christie's auction, but yeah, Trevor was a friend to Wings collectors, much in the way that and I'm having a senior moment here. Mark, help me out. The guy that ran off all the Beatles stuff.
Oh, John Barrett.
John Barrett.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, right.
Okay. I remember. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Andy.
Well, it's on a similar note, but Tom was talking about like video and stuff like that, and that's what I do for a living. I'm a video arts teacher. Mm-hmm. So you guys writing this book, working on it in the late '90s and way before the YouTube era, and you have everything chronicled with like all the videos and the performances and what's available and the specials. What was your access to the video content then? Was that just you guys had it in your collection? How did you have all it? Did you have to make calls and get video footage to actually analyze it if you didn't have it? That kind of thing?
It was pretty much all in our collections.
Yeah, I mean, one way or another. Yeah.
Right. You had. You had.
We had it. There was nothing in 8 Arms that we hadn't seen or listened to, except the take of Working Class Hero that has Yoko talking at the beginning of it. We trusted in other collectors who had it in his collection to tell us what it was, but we had seen and heard everything that went into it.
You had, yeah. Okay. Just side note, is there a version of Working Class Hero from the Willowbrook rehearsals? True or false?
I have my feelings on it. I don't know if Mark wants to weigh in here. I think it was from rehearsal for the Mike Douglas show.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur.
At one point, John says, "Okay, we want to see big smiles when it comes to this line," and so it was clearly for something that was going to be broadcast.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's what makes me think it was a Douglas.
And not Willowbrook. Okay.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. There was a book I remember looking at in, I would probably say around 88, and I would imagine this book had already been a couple years old. It was my uncle that introduced me to the Beatles and became a major fan through him. And he had this book, and flipping through the book, I had noticed that there were shots of Ringo, which looked like it could have been for a proposed 73 Ringo's TV special. Was there any information on that? Or is that something that could have been? Or anything you may have heard about?
There was going to be possibly a TV special, much along the lines of James Paul McCartney, but it was for the Goodnight Vienna album.
Okay. All right.
I'm not aware of anything for the Ringo album per se. Okay.
Cool, because sometimes you see things in the past and you're like wondering if this was actually true or not, and then you're like scrolling for hours on the internet trying to find that image again. Just
I know we're McCartney focused here, but we're asking all solo questions, which is fine. So I wanted to pick your brain here regarding one of the session musicians that Lennon always used in 73 and 74. And I like his work a lot, especially on those 2 albums, Ken Asher, keyboards. Did you ever have to interview him?
I had some email correspondence with him through one of the researchers that helped me with Lennonology, so it wasn't for the 8 Arms book.
I figured it was for Lennonology, but it was
for Lennonology that I'd spoken with him, but he turned up on the AFM contracts.
I figured he would. Yeah.
Did you guys see the new updated Maybe I'm Amazed video?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
It looks good.
Yeah.
I wish they would have done that kind of work for the McCartney years.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
Not change the aspect
right.
ratios and
Right,
you know,
exactly. Yeah, because we did a show on that recently, and then that's part. I mean, you can tell when they blew it up. I mean, you can just tell the image just isn't. You know, and then plus they did a great job on Wonderful Christmas Time. Last year too. You know, and I'm hoping that leads to an updated version of the McCartney years, at least maybe upgraded to Blu-ray. You know, it would be a nice treat.
A complete box of all of the videos.
Yeah, because he's added another 20 videos since that came out.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Well, you're talking about passing the torch, and there's another collector nowadays that's doing some high caliber research in the different types of videos, and I think he posted something online recently that showed all of the different iterations of the McCartney promo film for Maybe I'm Amazed, and how the font had changed, and the cropping and the aspect ratios and the like. And the guy's name's Mike Carrera, and he's done some great research into some of the post-2000 stuff.
Okay, yeah, that name sounds familiar.
Get to writing.
Get to writing. Do you guys read other people's books at all? On the Beatles? I mean, what have been some of your favorites over the last few years? Maybe since 2000.
Since 2000?
Yeah. You know, I mean, obviously there's Lewison's Tune In book, which I think is
Tune In. I mean, the extended version. I thought Lennonology, of course. Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that in a second.
I'll tell you what.
I have that book too, Chip.
Yeah.
I have it as well.
I feel like the best Beatles book that has come out since then is Peter Doggett's "You Never Give Me Your Money."
You Never Give Me Your Money. Very true.
I've read that book. It's rare that I read a book more than once anymore. I used to as a kid all the time.
I agree with you 100%.
Reread. But he did a fantastic job.
Fascinating story.
And lots of good primary research. That's part of the problem, frankly, that I find, because I do read all the time. And, one of my issues is just the lack of primary research that's out there these days. That people are just cribbing off of what's already come out. And so even though I still buy Beatles books, I'm much more selective than I used to be. I used to buy everything. It didn't matter what it was that came out, I bought it. And I don't anymore. But that book, for me, I felt like took a topic that had not been overdone and really brought some life to it.
So, absolutely. You read how, to what Columbia giving, or was it what Capitol giving Paul a higher percentage of the royalties to come back to Capitol, or was that Columbia?
No, it was Capitol in '85, which was what brought that nice big new lawsuit.
Yes. I imagine that wasn't a nice, really cool meeting between the four, with Yoko in the room. I'm sure that was not a very good. That's a fascinating. And speaking of research too, I really enjoyed the Beatle Who Vanished by Jim Birkenstock.
That was a fun book.
That was a really good book. And the new series, the A is for Apple book, which I don't know if you guys know about, but just dealing with everything Apple and man, the wealth of information you're getting in that that series as well is pretty amazing.
One of the cool things too is there's been so many books as we know, and I studied in Liverpool for 2 years under the direction of Mike Brocken, and Mike Brocken put together and published a Beatles bibliography. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that, but your work is in that too. And he took a couple of us in our class, and we went through all the books. This was published in 2013, right before Tune In, just trying to get all the texts out there and publish a ultimate Beatles bibliography of what's available. And obviously, the second it goes out, it's out of date. And he did publish an update, a supplement also about a year later. But I helped out with some of that work over there, putting that together. Cool. But that's a really good book to get your hands on. If you want to just get a book of all the Beatle books that are out there, it's pretty good.
That's great.
Yeah, Chip, what about you? What about some of your favorite books over the last 20 years or so?
When I started Lennonology, I said, I'm not going to read anybody else's Beatle book. I'm going to start from scratch.
Oh, okay.
So that I didn't get a kind of, oh, well, I thought I read that somewhere, but who was it? And I didn't want to have any disinformation work its way into the manuscript. So I started from scratch. The only people that I believed were Lewison and John Wynne.
Okay.
And so I didn't read really any Beatle books in the 15 years that I was working on that. Now, my co-author, Scott Riley, had the pleasure, if you want to call it that, of going through these other books and saying, well, Chip, here's something we might want to look at.
Mm-hmm.
But I tried to keep my head clear. So I've got a lot of things to catch up on, but then, like Mark said, a lot of it's just retreads.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I get some time to read, I think I probably should read Tune In.
Right.
The big version. I did read the small one.
Right. Well,
But,
you're speaking of Lennonology, then I guess I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask, how's, I know obviously the first volume is out. I mean, they're going to be a second volume. How is that looking? When are you expecting that to come out?
I'm always kind of plugging away on it, but it's one of those that it'll be done when it's done. When I think it's finished, I have a kind of goal that I'd like to. I have a vision for it, but a lot of people have told me that, well, put in the availability items that like you have in 8 arms.
Right.
Well, you can't be real consistent across John's catalog because not everything's available. So, I'm still, it's a double-edged sword, and I'm not sure which way I'm going to go yet. But all the information's there, and I've been writing some. So, to answer your question, I don't know.
Very good. No, that's fine with me. That's fine. You also started the project with Cozen and Sinclair with the McCartney legacy, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You started that from beginning, but left the project, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The John stuff was just taking too much of my time, and I didn't feel that I could contribute to the same level of enthusiasm that they carried for the McCartney project. So,
gotcha.
I just talked to Abe today, and they I think have a couple volumes under contract. So I'm looking forward to reading it. Yeah,
last time we had Cozen on the show, he gave us an update on the book, and we talked about getting the publisher, getting the publishing. So that was cool. And I think they said they're working on 2 books, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Yeah.
So I don't think I could work with a publisher just because I know what I want it to say and I know how I want it to look.
Yeah.
And
that was a decision that was made early on with us.
Okay.
We knew we're not taking this because what an editor will do, and they're going to say people don't really care about this. And it's like, well,
because it needs to be out there. We're putting this out there, and that's the end of it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. You don't have to answer this question, Chip, but how much of your own money did you put into the 8 Arms to Hold You?
God, I don't know. I mean, we talked about the telephone bills.
Yeah.
I bought a lot of recording session documents from one of the 4 so that I was able to, and that wasn't cheap, and buying tapes of things that aren't in the widely circulating. So I have no idea, but we probably made a couple cents an hour.
Gotcha.
If you were to
that much
profit.
That
much?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andy. Go ahead.
What was your initial print run when you first published?
For the initial 8 Arms?
Yeah.
3,000 copies.
Okay.
Which was a lot.
Okay.
From what I understand. And since talking to publishers and printers and the like, I found out that the average self-published book sells about 250 copies.
Wow.
Because that's all the family and friends that an author can get to buy it.
Right. Well, certainly eclipse that.
Yeah.
So in looking back on it, it's like, wow, that, that's pretty good. And the fact that people are still interested in it now I think is a testament to
quality of your work. Absolutely.
The quality.
Yeah.
And I always say that the most important part of that book is the fact that if I hadn't have written it, I wouldn't have met my wife, and I wouldn't be a very happy man right now. So I met my wife as a result of
That's
writing
awesome.
that book.
I love it.
That's right.
I love to hear things like that. That's very cool.
The next year.
Yeah. Talk about when the book was complete, here it is. You guys can finally ship this book off. I mean, what was the drink of choice? I mean, was there a sigh of relief, or was there, talk about that experience of finally finishing the project?
I think I had a month or two of post-production work after Mark had signed off on the final text, in getting it ready for print. I remember I finished it at 4:00 in the morning on October 9th, 2000.
Wow.
And it was out of date by the end of the day.
Right,
That's
of course.
the day that the Plastic Ono Band and Double Fantasy
remixes came out.
So we had it. It took another couple weeks to print it, and we had it out on Halloween of 2000.
Yeah.
Very cool. So then there was a second run of the book, or was just always just the first initial run?
First.
It was 3,000 copies, you said?
Yeah.
3,000 initial copies.
Gotcha. And those are all gone.
Those are gone, Ski. So that's why
how soon did you guys make an electronic edition available, to buy before your update? Was there an electronic version available before the update? There wasn't.
No.
Okay.
No,
Gotcha.
that was that was the piece,
right?
And it stayed that way until a couple years ago.
2018.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
So like you said, Mark, this is a McCartney centric show. If you can, I would like to get yours and Chip's summary of McCartney's solo career. I mean, what are your thoughts just on the last 50 years? Has it been a successful one, or I mean, do you still enjoy his music today, Mark?
The last album that I truly enjoyed by Paul was Chaos and Creation. I felt like if Paul had never made another album again after that, it would have been perfectly fine, because for me, he still had his voice.
Yeah.
He had a real passion. And I think at that point, because he didn't get along all that well with Nigel, that it created a better piece of work. And even though for him it certainly was not the best time in his life on a personal level, but in terms of the work that it produced, I mean, that record is, to me, astonishing for someone in that late period of their career.
Right.
So, I can't say that I've been thrilled with the material that's come out since then. And again, the voice has a lot to do with it as well, and just sort of a lack of true focus. But in terms of the career from McCartney through Chaos and Creation, incredibly high moments. I will never ever forget the first time listening to Band on the Run all the way through the tender age of 9, and being just like, wow, I have to listen to this over and over and over. I mean, it meant as much to me as any Beatles album at that time.
Right.
It was, it was such an amazing piece of work. And, going forward from that, records that, maybe that I really liked, things like Back to the Egg, which you know, I still like to this day, and it doesn't get a lot of props from Paul or
Well,
anybody
see, and
else.
that's and that's the funny thing about these archive releases is we're getting a whole new perspective on these albums, and they've all been getting favorable reviews. I mean, I can remember when Wildlife was announced on the Hoffman forums, people were like, I can't believe I'm going to dish out all this money for this album again, you know, and then then now people are just looking at all of these past albums very favorably. And I would imagine the same will be true for London Town and Back to the Egg when we finally get those.
I agree. There's great material on those records. And so while he certainly, you know, it's what I said before, that when you have someone who's put out as much material as he has over that 50-year period, some of it is going to be fantastic. There's no way it can't be, and it was. And some of it, as you know, the more recent material, I'm not a huge Egypt Station fan, not a huge New fan.
Oh, well, okay.
You know, there are great songs on each. Certainly, definitely on New. The latest record just didn't click with me, and I don't know if it's aging. I don't know if it's just that stuff, I don't listen to stuff as often as I did at one time, and so I wasn't able to give it the true listening that it deserved. But anyway, that's my take.
Cool.
Amazing highs and some really incredible lows.
Chip, on you.
I used to be a really hardcore Paul collector, in that if there was an edit or any sort of variation out there, you know, I'd chase all the promotional discs and the like. And, you know, I kind of quit doing that maybe around 2000. You know, maybe the 8 Arms was just too much. We were going to try and keep updating it on the fly. And when I started going through show after show after show from the Driving Rain tour, it just completely burned me out.
Understandable.
So I buy his stuff as it comes out. I don't chase everything like I used to. I see if he comes to town. I don't travel for him like Mark does. So, you know, my relationship with McCartney probably peaked when we got to meet him in '94. I mean, we got to meet him together.
Yep.
Oh, very cool. What was where was that, and how did it go?
That was when Linda was first introducing her vegetarian frozen entrees. St. Louis was a test market. So she had a press conference in St. Louis, and we'd come to learn from the other couple they'd had that Paul was a mark, and he came out halfway through it and joined the proceedings.
Gotcha.
So kind of wrangled a press through, I think I got it from Larry Young at the food group, whoever was producing the dinners. And we got to go in, and we put on our ties and our suit coats and looked like journalists, and
set up my little camera in the back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, it didn't catch the most important part when we were up there talking to him.
Yes,
boy, that was a thrill.
Yes, it was amazing. It was the ideal way to meet the man because, number one, it was not, I would say, at the top 40 people there. At the most. He was total PR Paul, so he was in a great mood. But the crowd was small enough to where he was really able to individually sort of acknowledge what we were showing him. Like I brought up my hardcover copy of Linda's 60s book, you know, and I guess it had just come out in paperback, but he said, hey, Linda, it's a hardcover, you know. Or when I took him my Paul is Live LP, you know, things like that. So, you know, there was an opportunity to be sort of personalized with him, which was really cool.
Cool.
And I took my fireman. I took my fireman CD too.
Which one?
And I said The first one.
Okay.
Just come out.
Okay.
And I threw it to him and I said, hey,
right.
is the fireman signing today? And he's like, well, I guess if you buy it, I have to, you know. So I'm probably one of the few people who has a signed fireman CD.
Oh,
you know?
good for you.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. That's awesome, Mark.
Oh, man.
And Linda was wonderful. Yeah, Linda was truly a wonderful human being. Yeah.
That's great to hear. There's a question I like to ask at the end of the show of my guests, and I guess you could take this, you know, all things considered. Let's just go from 70 to 75, if you will. And I usually ask this of guests who are really familiar with the solo careers, and obviously you two qualify for this question. But starting with Chip, whose solo career do you think missed who more? Did Paul solo career miss John more, or did John's solo career miss Paul more? What do you think, Chip?
I think John did all right on his own. I think Paul needed a sounding board throughout, and he found that at first in Linda, and then later in Denny Lane and his other collaborators over the years. You're talking just through 75, though.
Right? Yeah.
You know, boy, they're just on such separate tangents at that points in their career. I'd have to say that Paul missed John more.
Oh, cool. All right. Mark, your thoughts?
I would concur. Yeah, I think that there were certain albums that would never have been issued by either artist had they still been a working team. You would not have Sometime in New York City.
No,
and you would not have had
Wildlife. Right.
You know, I mean, those records would not have come out. So, you know, but yeah, I'd have to say that Paul needed the sounding board.
Somebody.
He needed, exactly, and he needed that person to say, you know what, this is crap. Yeah. And he didn't, you know, and that's and Paul preferred it that way, and I get that. But yeah, so that's my take on it as well.
Cool. Andy, was there anything else? Any other questions you had before we let the two gentlemen plug anything that they want to plug?
No, I'm good. It's been a pleasure having you guys on, and thank you as a young fan to now finally meet you guys virtually.
Well,
cool.
So we old guys are very happy to meet y'all. So
we appreciate it. We really appreciate it. So, Mark, anything you're working on right now that you want to, let anybody know about, or anything like that? Anything coming up in the pipeline?
Not really. I mean, I've got kind of a different life now, and I'm a counselor at a community college here, and so during this sort of shutdown, it's been kind of weird. So my projects right now are trying to get my house in order with my wife.
Okay.
We both are collectors, and we've had Liz, my wife, worked for Universal Music for many years.
Oh, wow.
So we've got a lot of combined years of cool stuff that have been sort of sitting in our basement waiting for us to get to them. So this is a good time. So I think my projects are primarily insular at the moment.
Okay, gotcha. And Chip, we talked about Lennonology for a few minutes, but is anything else that you're working on that you want to talk about?
Like Mark, with this shutdown, and my wife is a very avid photographer, and is taken thousands of reels as the kids have grown up, and we're trying to get those in order.
Okay.
Our daughter's engaged, and our son's probably not far behind.
Oh, great! Congratulations.
For the wedding. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there's that. I'm still plugging away on Lennonology Volume 2. I'm editing a book for another couple of gentlemen on a totally non-Beatles project, which is kind of refreshing to be able to walk away from something. And then, as we mentioned earlier, I just had the Family Way reissue that's coming out, but the Lennonology book and the Eight Arms Remastered are pretty much the main items that are out there right now.
So how can people get this new updated version of 8 Arms to Hold You?
The electronic version, 8 Arms to Hold You, which we're calling 8 Arms to Hold You Remastered, just to
go with the times.
That is only available through my website, which is Lennonology.com.
Okay.
And the Lennonology book is available. The hardback, the few remaining hardback copies are only available there, and most of the paperback copies, I think Amazon might have a few, but I've got the rest of them. So,
gotcha.
You want either one of them?
If when we're done with here, I might talk to you about that hardcover copy.
All right.
It's worth owning.
I believe me, my cousin who I started this show with raves about it nonstop. He was like giving me all these questions for you, and I was just like, no, we're just gonna we're mainly gonna deal with the 8 Arms to Hold You stuff. So, but I look forward to discovering that book as well. Gentlemen, it's been a real treat having you guys on here. We really appreciate it. Whatever you guys do in the future, let us know. We're more than happy to, help push any, Beatles related project that you guys do. And obviously, when Lennonology Volume 2 is ready to go, we'll be more than happy to help spread the word. But I think it's already a loved project anyway, so I don't know if that project's going to need much help selling. Andy, anything you want to push before we sign off?
No, just thanks a lot, guys, for lots of years of enjoyment and lots of insights gained from your work. And congratulations.
We appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Right.
It was fun to revisit this after all that time. I didn't remember a lot about its production, and
right.
I think the most fun story were the scanning the covers.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was great. So anyways, thank you everybody for listening. As always, you can reach out to us on our email, twolegspodcast@gmail.com, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Two Legs Podcast. We have our YouTube channel, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. Please check that out and subscribe to that channel. We really appreciate it. Everybody that's been sending us emails and talking about the show, adding their 2 cents, we really appreciate that as well. So keep those emails and comments coming. We like to read all of them. So again, thank you to Chip. Thank you to Mark. Andy, as always, it's a pleasure having you here. And as always, everybody out there, have a great day and a beautiful night. So long.
Good night.
Take care.
Listening to Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, hosted by Tom Hunyadi and Andy Nichols, with musical contributions by Dylan C.